Yeah, I'm going to go with, I don't think this one was super easy, but I'm going to go with Lab McConkey. He led, I just talked about how ridiculously efficient and productive Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. were, but it was Lad McConkey who led all rookie wide receivers in yards per route run and first downs per route run and yards per target. Historically great rookie season. And so now hopefully he gets a bit more volume this year. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Comparing the 2025 rookie class with last year's 2024 class, we are going to do a Dynasty mock draft using only these two classes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Welcome to School of Scott. Theo Greminger with Scott Barrett every single week. And this week, we are joined by Danny Kelly of The Ringer. Really happy to have you on here, Danny. A lot going on, a lot for us to talk about. What's going on with you?
Not too much, just doing a little downtime after the draft and getting into a lot of rookie drafts so far. So that's been really fun and kind of cool to see how the ADP is shaking out and like where you find value and things like that. So yeah, love this time of year because of all the rookie drafts, especially.
100%. The rookie draft content is awesome. Love when the schedule drops and we're sort of able to utilize that for our best ball builds. Never like a dull moment in this thing of ours. And Scott, you just dropped all your strength of schedule data. That's all coming together. We've got some cool discussions, and we're going to do a strength of schedule show right here on School of Scott sometime in the next week or two. But any sort of big takeaways for you on a player or a team that's setting up to have a really nice fantasy season?
Yeah, I mean, lots of hot takes. Definitely be on the lookout.
Give us one. Well,
I was just looking at Brock Purdy's strength of schedule, and it looks glorious. And I had to check his MVP odds. They're not amazing. I think he's like 7th or 8th in MVP odds, but I don't know. It's maybe the softest strength of schedule. And then he's going to get a healthy Christian McCaffrey back, a healthy Trent Williams back. Brandon Ayuk may be healthy at the tail end of the season, but Ricky Pearsall ascending. Jauan Jennings had the breakout. And I don't know. He just got paid, but you know me, I'm a big Brock Purdy fan, and I had those MVP bets on him. What was it, 2 years ago, where week 15, like right before he played Lamar Jackson, he was the betting favorite. So I really like a bounce back year from Brock Purdy. One of the crazy stats I had on him. So if you remember, week 13 had that like brutal blizzard game. And then week 15 was that very heavy rain game where like the opposing quarterbacks also really struggled. So if you just take out those two games, over his last 8 games, he averaged 23.8 fantasy points per game. George Kittle, I think, was putting up like top 3, top 5 numbers among wide receivers in that stretch. And that was all without Christian McCaffrey, without Ayuk, without Trent Williams for most of that stretch. So I don't know. I'm just a Kyle Shanahan believer, a Brock Purdy believer. And so that was one of the ones that jumped out to me. And I had to just quickly check his MVP odds, because you saw this last year where I had MVP bets on Jared Goff that didn't work out, but his odds skyrocketed like 2 weeks after the schedule release. And part of that was just because the schedule was so soft.
I had a huge league last year where we started Brock Purdy in week 17 because Jalen Hurts missed the week. And Brock Purdy went on to have like a 33-point week in FFPC. So always a big Brock Purdy fan because he made me some money last year. Danny, your thoughts on the 5-year, $265 million contract? And I think I agree with Scott that the San Francisco 49ers are all like well-valued guys. But I think that the number one question drafters need to know is which 49ers wide receiver should you be targeting? Should it be Ricky Pearsall? Should it be Jauan Jennings? Like Scott said, should you be taking a dive in on second half of the year, Brandon Ayuk bags? Where are you at on that one, and Purdy?
I think I'm probably in a void on Ayuk for now, just because of the major injury that he's coming off of, and just like the weird vibes I think with him and the team continue to happen. You know what I mean? He obviously was in the doghouse early in his career, then seemed to get out of it with Shanahan. I just think Shanahan's a little bit volatile when it comes to the way he plays his guys. I would be targeting Jauan Jennings probably with some optimism and hope for Ricky Pearsall. Obviously, he got shot, so that kind of eliminates or doesn't like nullify what happened in year one with him, which I thought was a little bit disappointing. But I think it just creates a lot of uncertainty with like what he's going to be actually in this offense going forward. I think I'm optimistic, but Jauan Jennings feels like the guy. It'll be Kittle and Jennings, and then hopefully Pearsall starts to develop. I just wouldn't count really on Ayuk right now. And then obviously Christian McCaffrey, if he can come back, he's going to steal some of the targets in that offense. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of shakes out. As for Purdy, I think as a Seahawks homer, it pains me to hear you say that his strength of schedule is so light. Because I think for the most part in Seahawks land, and I'm a part of that, Seahawks fans are kind of glad they extended him for that much money. And now it's kind of like, all right, let's see what he can do let's see what the team can do with him making, what he's making and how they have to like make sacrifices at other spots. So I think generally speaking, Seahawks fans are glad they extended him because they don't really believe in him, but that's pretty much proven to be really wrong the last couple of years. So I don't know. We'll kind of see how it all shakes out. I think Seahawks fans kind of attribute more of the Purdy success to Shanahan than to Purdy himself, but I know that's pretty unfair. Purdy unfair. I didn't even mean to do that pun. But yeah, I would say generally it feels like an overpay, but it's hard to deny what he's done the last 2 years. I mean, he's been awesome. So I think Seahawks fans as a rule think that he's going to turn back into a pumpkin at some point here.
Yeah, Jauan Jennings is wide receiver 37 right now on Underdog. That seems like a kind of a gift because he's very close to an ADP with Ricky Pearsall. With Pearsall, we're looking for him to take a big step forward. All Jauan Jennings needs to do is maintain sort of the metrics he hit last year, and he's going to end up being a huge value. Scott, anything to add on the 49ers wide receiver situation?
Well, I think we're going to get to it a little bit later, but yeah, I think either Jauan or Pearsall, maybe both, are fantasy league winners this year.
Yeah, so Pearsall will be a fun one to discuss because again, we are going to rank all of the 2024 and 2025 players in a dynasty rookie draft. Be interesting to see where a guy like Ricky Pearsall settles in. But before we dive into some of those questions, let's take a step back. Danny, we haven't talked to you since the NFL draft. We're, of course, in dynasty leagues with one another. Who was your absolute favorite landing spot for any single player in this draft class, fantasy football-wise?
I think the guy that came to mind when you asked that is Kaleb Johnson for the Steelers. Like him landing in Pittsburgh, I think made a ton of sense. I felt like he felt like one of the more landing spot sensitive players in the draft. I think there's a pretty wide range of opinions on like how good he is. I think he's just going to be perfect in a wide zone offense, like the Arthur Smith offense. There's this is not comparing him to this player, but like stylistically, he did kind of remind me of like a Derrick Henry type of player where you need 2 to 3 like yards of runway to get going, and then he looks awesome. But if he's like in a phone booth, he's caught in the backfield, he looks like the worst running back ever. There's like plays where Derrick Henry looks like he's slow as shit, gets hit in the backfield, tips over, and then there's also plays where he bowls over 4 or 5 guys and runs like 100 miles an hour to a touchdown. So he's one of those players where depending on which run you watch, can really, like change your opinion on him. But I think Kaleb Johnson going to Pittsburgh makes a ton of sense. I think it's really good for him. I think he's still going to be in a committee. That's kind of the Arthur Smith deal. There's not a lot of guys that are just going to go in and land and be like a 3-down workhorse type of back. I think obviously Hampton and Jeanty are kind of those two guys right off the bat. But I think in terms of after those two guys, that Johnson to Pittsburgh just feels like a right fit for me. So I was pretty excited to see that one.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to change his jersey color too much.
From Iowa, it doesn't even have to change. Yeah, it doesn't have to change anything.
easy Photoshop for the people on X. Scott, anything to add? It's a pathway to volume for Johnson. We touched on that recently on a couple of pods. He settled in at RB25 on Underdog. You're in or out on that price, Scott?
Yeah, I like that. I'd say I'm in. And I agree with Danny. I think that's a great landing spot. Should get a ton of volume.
Last year, Danny, I had you on a pod, and we talked about this year's Devon Achane. That was sort of, we were chasing it with last year's draft class, and pretty much Bucky Irving was the only one that turned into anywhere close. let's talk about this year's Bucky Irving. So we'll
Mhm.
add a caveat. We're specifically looking at day 3 running backs only. If
Yeah.
one of these day 3 guys like threads the needle, everything sort of bounces their way, and they get this advantageous touch situation and opportunity situation,
Mhm.
which player is it, and on what which player is it that could give you that sort of result?
I think there's actually a handful of guys that are really interesting in that sort of category, because I felt like the running back class that we were so excited about coming into, there was such depth at it that a lot of guys felt at round 4, round 5 that we weren't quite expecting to fall into that range. But the player that comes to mind for me is Bayshul Tuten.
Love it.
For the Jags, just because I think ETN, obviously a new coaching staff, new system there. ETN, I think, hasn't really been all that impressive the last couple of years. I mean, I've always liked ETN, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't come together for him. And I don't think the team is probably going to be committed to him in the long term. I think Tuten, of all the players, and you went back to the Devon Achane comp or whatever, the question a couple of years ago, of all the players in this year's draft, Tuten was the one that reminded me of Achane the most, where you kind of like, there's runs on his tape where you're like, whoo, that gets you going. That, like, you feel that one in your loins a little bit when you watch him play, just because he's got that scoot, he's got that giddy up, the explosiveness, his ability. And this is something I felt with Achane, and why I was so convicted on him and why I loved him so much, was like, he's so fast, he can access rush lanes that most running backs can't really access. And you don't, like, it's like hidden yards almost, where the acceleration and like burst to get to top speed and get through a little crease in the defense, you wouldn't even notice it if you're watching another running back, because they just don't get there. You know what I mean? But he has the ability to access those rush lanes. So obviously, I think when you're a 4th round pick, it's you try not to get too excited about a player. But I think there's a path to volume. He's a really exciting, explosive player. And I think obviously now we're talking about Liam Cohen. And he was the guy that went with a 4th rounder in Bucky Irving last year. And kind of like gave him his trust and leaned on him. And when you have a guy who's showing on the field and a coach that has shown the willingness to play rookies, I think that's really exciting. So I would say Tuten is probably the one. I think obviously Skattebo with the Giants, I don't know if that really counts or not, but he's another guy that I think would be really interesting in that sort of range.
Right. That would be my answer, would be Skattebo, but it's like so tight, so close between him and Tuten. And so Danny and I are co-managers in a lot of our leagues, and this has been our decision.
We've just been like flip-flopping it. Yeah. Like we have a lot of both of those guys for whatever reason. We're kind of in that range. And yeah, it's like, should we do Tuten or Skattebo this draft?
Yeah. Who'd we take last time? Just take the other guy.
Yeah.
I'll throw out, like, I think those two guys are obviously both the correct answers here, but you're paying like RB3 prices for both of them. If you want to go super cheap and want to take a couple of dart throws, I really like DJ Giddens, because Jonathan Taylor's missed time every single year. And if we get 5-6 starts out of DJ Giddens in the money weeks, where you have a Shane Steichen offense, where we've seen guys like Zach Moss really thrive, I could see DJ Giddens putting up like a number of 15-point weeks in that situation. And then it would take a little bit more than just one injury. It would take an injury and also overcoming Blake Corum. But Jarquez Hunter is super, super, super deeper exciting. Your thoughts on either one of those guys, Danny?
Well, I want to give Scott a shout out on this one, because he put Hunter on the map for me in terms of, like, I guess he was flashing in a lot of Scott's metrics, the metrics that he looks at. Went and watched him, and I was definitely intrigued. I thought, a little bit stiff as a runner, but he's just so physical and so explosive that it almost doesn't matter. He's one of those guys that'll just like run through arm tackles, run through a guy. And then the landing spot, I think he went quite a bit earlier than people were expecting, or at least based on sort of the chatter pre-draft. He I think, and again, credit to Scott for kind of like picking out a guy that people weren't really talking about all that much. And he went to a good landing spot with the Rams, where, like you said, there's a path to production if you have an injury there, or maybe just we're talking about 2026, where he turns out to be like the starter for the Rams. It sounds like they really liked him and they're really interested in him. But yeah, I mean, just from the athletic metrics, the build, he's just like built like a rock. His acceleration, the backstory, I guess, is like pretty good. Scott, you could talk more about maybe sort of just like his backstory. I want to say Sean McVay said he's a man's man. He's just like just kind of like a country boy or whatever. And country strong. So I don't know. There's just a lot to like about Hunter, and he could be one of those players I think next year that we're talking about where it's like, man, he was not really on many people's radars prior to the draft, but now he's all of a sudden like a pretty big fantasy factor. And so he's another good one. The other guy I want to throw the name out here is Jacory Croskey-Merritt from who landed with the Commanders in round 7, just because there's not a ton of competition there. It doesn't feel like, based on some of the things that the team has said, obviously they didn't really do much this offseason. So Brian Robinson is probably pretty safe for the time being, but like there's just not a ton of competition there. And I could see him, emerging as a guy that people are, excited about going into 2026.
I love that you brought up Jacory Croskey-Merritt. Scott, I'm going to kick it over to you for some Jarquez Hunter thoughts, but I'll just give the School of Scott listeners a little bit of a tidbit. One of the better FFPC dynasty and high stakes managers around currently has 30K plus worth of Jacory Croskey-Merritt, has bet on him in just about every draft. We'll keep you anonymous for the time being, so we don't ruin the rest of your rookie drafts, but there's some big money on Jacory Croskey-Merritt. And just an interesting that Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, they don't bring anyone else in. And it was a team that was sort of constantly rumored to be going after a guy like Omarion Hampton, going after a guy like TreVeyon Henderson. So love the Jacory Croskey-Merritt call. But Scott, expand on the Jarquez Hunter discussion. This is a guy that you really liked in the draft process. It's also a franchise that has continually hit on day 3 talent. They hit on Puka Nacua, hit on Kyren Williams. Now they have another one in Jarquez Hunter potentially.
Yeah, so I really liked the analytics, and I was like, Danny, let me know what you think about this guy. I haven't watched him yet. I'm excited to watch him. Brett, the same thing. Mike Renner, the same thing. And they all came back and said the exact same. He's a little stiff hip for me, but I get why you like. There's plenty of like, but he's a little stiff hipped. And I told Danny this, and he was like, okay, the stiff hip thing makes sense within this context. And the context is that he's jacked out of his mind. He's won multiple powerlifting competitions. And the coolest thing about that is he won those competitions wearing cowboy boots. Like he's an Xaiver Leggett, like good old boy who just like is so from the South, refuses to ever take his cowboy boots off. Like he can jump clear out of the pool, like standing in the water. I think wearing his cowboy boots in the pool because it's a sicko like that. And yeah, so he just crushed in the stats for me. It's, watching the post-draft press conferences, it was clear Hunter was their guy in day 3, like well in advance of the draft. And they've been watching him for over a year. He was on my radar when Tank Bigsby was coming out. Cause like Bigsby was coming out. I'm like, why is this guy supposed to go day 2? Like, who is this Jarquez Hunter who was like, averaged a full 1.5 yards per carry more than him. And then last year with a workhorse bell cow role, led the SEC in yards per carry. That's hard to do. So I like him. I mean, it's probably the case that Kyren Williams is just McVay's guy. Although they are talking about, a committee more than they ever have in the past. And we know there's so much potential or upside and value to being the RB1 of a Sean McVay offense. So there's upside if he can take that over. So I like that. I mean, these are definitely like guys to get later, not on par with a Skattebo or a Tuten, but for sure later round rookie picks with upside. I like it.
Danny, what do you have going on? I know you guys have your draft guide coming out at the Ringer. Also all the amazing podcast work you're putting out.
Yeah, we got the Ringer Fantasy Football Draft Guide up already, sort of our initial rankings. You got my Dynasty ranks on there, my Dynasty rookie ranks, so you can check that out. And then obviously the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, we are doing once a week right now, just kind of in the lull of the offseason, but we'll be ramping back up multiple times a week coming July, I believe. So yeah, that's what we got going on.
No, highly recommend all of your content. It's absolute fire. Let's talk about this year 2 class. So we had unbelievable success at the top of the wide receiver position. Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Nabers both finished as top 6 scorers at the wide receiver position in PPR leagues. You also had Ladd McConkey giving you 15 points per game. Then you had Marvin Harrison Jr., who was a busted ADP, was being drafted at like the 1-2 turn in redraft leagues. Certainly was going at the 101 or 102 in a lot of rookie drafts. Odunze, a significant bust. This was a guy that really failed to get started, only had 3 fantasy relevant weeks. And then Ricky Pearsall, who of course missed a good portion of the year and then had those big games at the end of the year. If you were going to bet on a year 2 wide receiver breakout, who would it be among these 3 guys? And feel free to throw out another name if there's one I'm not listing.
Yeah, I think I still believe in Rome Odunze. Obviously he had a lot of things go wrong as a rookie. The principal among them was he had a knee injury early on in the season. I think that kind of sapped some of his explosiveness and just athleticism. We see guys struggle through knee injuries all the time, and the production is not what you expect. So I'm hoping that was a big part of the reason he didn't really do as much as we were hoping in year 1. Obviously, the Caleb Williams faltering and really not being what we expected in year 1. And then, just like the coaching malpractice from start to finish with the Bears. I want to believe in Caleb. I want to believe in Ben Johnson more specifically. Like, I think Ben Johnson going to the Bears could be like, I think people are talking about it, but it almost feels like it's still being a little bit underrated that Ben Johnson went to the Bears. Like, this is so huge based on what he's done for the Lions the last few years. Like, if he can bring that system, his play calling, his play sequencing, his creativity, like, you think about the most creative teams in the NFL, and the Lions are lapping the field in terms of like, they're running hook and ladders, they're throwing to their tackles, they're doing all kinds of their fake fumble plays, they're doing all kinds of stuff. So I'm just really excited about what Ben Johnson can bring, and obviously how Odunze can be featured in that offense. So I'd say probably Odunze there, just based on his route running. I didn't think he was very good in contested catch situations last year. Maybe that will level out this season. Just overall, his confidence, I think, will be better. I just don't have a ton. I don't know what to think about Marvin Harrison. Obviously, I just think his chemistry with Kyler Murray wasn't great. He obviously took quite a while to kind of get going. I just don't really know what to make of that. So I would say Odunze would be the guy that I'd probably be targeting right now in terms of like he's definitely at a discount compared to where he was last year.
Yeah, and he's at a huge discount. And Scott, I'd say that Danny's a little bit contrarian over a lot of the guests that I've had on the last few weeks with post Luther Burden selection. It's been sort of a free fall for Odunze in ADP and in Dynasty rookie draft value as well. So if Odunze is going to hit like Danny's saying, and Luther Burden has this potential pathway to high end slot role, could DJ Moore be the loser here, Scott? What is your take on this? I know you've made some Odunze calls here on School of Scott.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. We did see Ben Johnson seemingly throw some shade at DJ Moore. Like, yeah, if you're going to be on our team, you have to give full effort all the time. We have no tolerance for all that stuff. I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of anti Odunze. I just feel like we're living in the post breakout era for young players, where if a guy gets enough playing time as a rookie, he sort of immediately just shows you who he is, good or bad. I mean, I guess you could come up with those, those excuses, like, and you would need that, like, play calling was horrible, quarterback play was rough, target competition was, and so, maybe it's just JSN. It would be one of those outliers for, bad as a rookie, great as a sophomore in the second half. So I guess sorry to ramble, but I guess what it comes down to me is just like, I don't know, just give me Luther Burden, because that's the nuts spot to be in a Ben Johnson offense. I think the slot. And so I feel a little bit more comfortable. They're going right around each other, right? Or Burden's actually a little bit cheaper in Dynasty.
Yeah, so it's closed. It's closed because there's a lot of people like yourself, Scott, that have been singing the praises of Burden. So if you want more access to Burden, stop talking so positively about him would be my advice to you. But yeah, I think they've closed up a little bit. So basically, if you want some Burden, I've seen some big trades go down for him in some big leagues. But Odunze, I have seen some people sort of buying low with this opportunity. I think the bottom line is take some shots on having access to this Ben Johnson offense. Everything Danny talked about in terms of creativity, aggressiveness, and productivity, both in terms of rushing and in receiving. Ben Johnson has given us that every single season. So we're very excited about him at Fantasy Points and glad to see you are as well, Danny. We talk about Bucky Irving. Let's talk about Bucky Irving from a redraft context, because Bucky was everybody's favorite, like, late round hit. It was Bucky Irving. It was Chase Brown. Those two guys last year were the big positive storyline picks for you in all formats. now Bucky is by all accounts a premium asset, especially in best ball and in redraft. You're seeing in FFPC leagues, Bucky Irving goes somewhere around the 2-3 turn. And as of today on Underdog, Bucky Irving is going 22 overall. On paper, this is going to be a great offense. Averaged 29 points per game last year. Bucky should be in a larger role in year 2. Are you buying it, though, Danny? Basically, the opportunity cost of drafting Bucky Irving at this sort of a premium, are you there?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Just because I believe in the talent, I believe in his ability. I think he showed, elusiveness, vision, patience as a runner. I think there's some, there's some meat on the bone in terms of what he can do in the passing game. I'm not a huge believer in Rachaad White. I think just the big question, and it's a bit of a leap of faith. A lot of the guys we're talking about today kind of feel like a leap of faith, like Odunze, leap of faith. I think going back real quick, like the Burden versus Odunze discussion is funny to me because like, what did Burden do last year that makes you so excited? You know what I mean? Like he fell off pretty precipitously in college last year. And then there's all these effort questions and things like that. So I don't know. I'm just like, I think to respond to the things that Scott was saying, I totally understand that point of view, but I think I'm just kind of like buying the dip a little bit on Odunze more than I'm like super confident in him. But anyway, going back to the Bucky Irving thing, like, I think there's a lot of uncertainty here. I don't know anything about Josh Grizzard. Do you guys have strong opinions on Josh Grizzard as a play caller?
Yeah, I do, or at least I just need to make note of one thing.
Yeah.
Josh Grizzard was born in Lizard Lick, North Carolina.
Josh.
And went on to the Ivy League, Scott. I mean, not a whole lot of Lizard Lick guys going to the Ivy League.
True.
That's right. Josh Grizzard, Lizard Lick. Is that a tongue twister? What is that? I don't know.
Yeah. So I think obviously that's a variable that we don't know. We don't have the answers to what that's going to mean, but generally speaking, like you said, good offense. I'm betting on the talent. I'm betting on the surrounding cast, and hoping that there's a little bit more in the passing game that he can get involved with this year. I wish I had I should go back and like read our DM, Scott, because I Bucky Irving last year was one of my biggest regrets in terms of just letting the draft process affect my thinking, because I remember at one point I was talking to you, I was like, I think Bucky Irving is RB3 in this class, and then he like tested poorly. He was under 200 pounds, and then we were just like, fuck, okay, I guess never mind. You know what I mean? Like, because he really popped in a lot of your stats too, I believe. Isn't that right?
Yeah. So here's what happened is you had Devon Achane as like one of the best running back prospects you've ever seen, or like you comped him to Tyreek Hill, like Tyreek Hill of running backs, which is one of the best calls of all time. And I was like, I could get there if he wasn't this weight and this BMI. It's just, so I don't see him ever getting more than 10 carries, whatever. And then Achane goes crazy, skyrockets in value. We didn't have anywhere near as much of him as we should have, because I sort of like overrode Danny or vetoed, or at least
I took him in all my other leagues though. So
right. I fought you too much. And then Bucky Irving, I was like, if he wasn't this weight or this BMI, he would be like my RB1 or my RB2 in this year's class. And same exact thing happened. I eventually came back around by like, after my rookie drafts were done and like it was redraft season, I was like, Bucky Irving is this year's Kyren Williams. I'm going all in. It was a little late from a rookie draft perspective, but yeah. And you were saying this with Achane, and I think it's even more the case now, is like weight and size doesn't matter as much as it did in the past. And like you saw that, like James Cook was another example of this. Kyren Williams is an example of this, where teams are, it looks like, overlooking the size component as it relates to volume. I will say, devil's advocate, we'll say Bucky is probably just a little too expensive for my liking. Because like you said, there's the new OC. So that's regime uncertainty. And then Rachaad White, like I think Bucky Irving's so much better, but Rachaad White's still a pretty good pass catcher, or a great pass catcher. And Irving only cleared a 57% snap share twice last year. So like, in order to be a productive fantasy running back, that is just like such an outlier outcome with that usage. And so maybe this team does actually care about the size. I don't know.
Yeah,
We're splitting hairs. He's awesome, but
Right.
he's a little expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking chances on Bucky Irving at the 2-3 turn pretty often right now because a lot of times, like you said, Danny, the opportunity for more receiving work. Rachaad White was so efficient last year, especially at the beginning of the season as a receiver. So if Bucky Irving has sort of nuked him even more this offseason, I think there's a chance that Bucky Irving could be like top 2, top 3 in receptions. And you don't want to miss out on a Devon Achane like leap in year 2 as a receiver. So
Yeah.
I just believe in Bucky Irving. I think he's a fine value there at the 2-3 turn. But we'll see pretty soon, won't we, guys?
To interject real quick. Sorry to interrupt. I remember like after Achane's rookie year, and not to keep coming back to Achane, but after Achane's rookie year, I was like, get him 18 touches a game versus like 13 or whatever it is he had as a rookie. I can't remember exactly what it was. Get him 18 touches a game, and he's the RB1. And if you look at like the games where Tua was playing, like Achane was pretty damn close to that. Bucky Irving averaged 14.9 touches per game last year. Get him to 18 touches a game, and he's at least an RB1 in my opinion. High end RB1. So I don't know. It's one of those things where you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith that they're going to get him more touches, but I think if they do, he's going to do a lot with it.
Danny, last week we had Chris Wecht on School of Scott. We talked about the fantasy points projections and sort of the way we can exploit it using current ADP to find players that we believe are excessively good values, and also a couple players that maybe you should avoid. Highly recommend everybody go and check that out. Our quarterback 1 in our projections is Jayden Daniels, who's a player that Scott and I both think is going to be in contention for the MVP award this year. I think it's pretty safe money that at the end of the season, Jayden Daniels is still going to remain the QB1 in terms of dynasty value out of the 2024 class. But there's a lot of players vying for the second most valuable. If you had to put one chip on a player to finish there at the end of the season, who would it be among all of the other 2024 quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's so tough. I obviously want to believe in, Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson, just like that situation kind of fixing itself, but it's hard to kind of see it's hard to ignore what happened last year. I probably would say Maye is up there just for me, just because the combination of they're upgrading the system around him, they're upgrading the coaching staff, the coaching, play calling. He's also, one of the higher in terms of scramble rate. I want to say he was second last year in scramble rate among all quarterbacks. So he's not afraid to scramble. He's not afraid to like put the ball in, tuck the ball and run and get to first downs, get rushing touchdowns probably this year at a little bit higher rate. So I don't know. I'd say probably Maye is the one I would answer that question with. I don't feel super confident about it because I think, they don't have any really established receivers outside of Stephon Diggs, and he's coming off an ACL. So I worry about the weapons around him, but just from a size, coaching upgrade, offensive line upgrade, ideally, hopefully some of the receivers start to look a little bit better this year. Jalen Polk, God, that was a tough one. That was a tough pill to swallow last year. Just looking like one of the worst receivers I've ever seen. I didn't expect him to be. I mean, I didn't expect him to be a star, but that was pretty crazy. Seeing how much he struggled. But yeah, I think just the upside that Maye brings as a scrambler and a little bit of a rusher, I think makes him really exciting this year.
I'm with you on that one. I think it's Drake Maye by the end of the season. Despite all the positivity with Caleb Williams, all the weapons around him, Drake Maye just sort of has that it factor that we're chasing in fantasy, like Josh Allen light type attributes. And we could see a real leap forward in the rushing production. Offensive line has to be a little bit better. They were bottom 5 in sacks allowed last year. And weapons wise, we'll see. I mean, they added a couple players, Diggs, Williams. We'll see if they get there. But Maye just having an entire season as the starter, I think the counting stats by the end of the year are going to be pretty strong. Scott, where are you at on this question?
I think this is one of the toughest questions in all of fantasy right now, because you have Caleb Williams, who, according to multiple scouts, was, the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. And now has the GOAT play caller and an insane supporting cast. You have Drake Maye, who he totally reshaped that offense. That offense was like deader than dirt, like 2 first downs per game through the air under Jacoby Brissett. He comes in, he really revitalizes that offense in a tremendous way. He's super productive for fantasy. He's running a lot. He's really productive on the ground. And then the coaching staff was just like, hey, we don't want you to get hurt. Stop running. And by the way, we're trying to lock up the first overall pick. I really like what he did this offseason. So I see tremendous upside, sort of like Josh Allen light. But at cost, to me, the answer is easy because this is so tight between these 3 quarterbacks. At cost, give it to the cheapest one, Bo Nix, who I think is super underrated. Sean Payton's track record with quarterbacks is insane. You know, not just like prime Drew Brees when he was tearing apart the league, but like a dusty 40-year-old Drew Brees who couldn't throw farther than 15 yards, backups like Teddy Bridgewater, Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill. They were all of them not good, putting up low-end QB1 numbers without much of a supporting cast at all. And then look at what Nix did last year with poor wide receiver play. He just had the 6th most fantasy points of a rookie quarterback ever. The first half of the year, he was running a lot, like way more than we ever expected. And he was productive on the ground. Then he dealt with multiple back fractures, played through it, and just balled out through the air throughout the entire second half. And so this year, I see everything coming together. Another year in the Sean Payton offense. He runs, he stays healthy, he balls out through the air. And so, yeah, at cost, to me, it's Bo Nix. But like the main takeaway is just like, I love all these quarterbacks. I think there is a league winner here. I think at least one. I think from a dynasty perspective, I want all 3 of these guys.
What's the strength of schedule situation with those 3 guys?
Oh, good question. Let me pull it up right now.
Sorry.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on. I mean, Scott, we're gonna have to do like an entire quarterback discussion show at some point here on School of Scott. I know, Scott, you got sort of a watch list for your Exodia value quarterback this year. So we can kind of talk that through on a future School of Scott. But I like the Bo Nix call. I mean, he was really, really good last year. They've made improvements around him, add Evan Engram, and then they add Pat Bryant, who they're really excited about, on top of having RJ Harvey. And I think Harvey's going to be the one that really, really helps him out a lot. Really well-rounded back that can catch the ball, also explosive as a runner. Bo Nix did it last year. Like, you talk about the lack of supporting cast around Drake Maye. On paper, it was sort of Cortland Sutton and the Miracles last year, Danny.
Yeah. I like everything Scott said about Nix. I think the supporting cast is going to be significantly improved. My whole take, though, and I actually just picked RJ Harvey in a dynasty league, so I don't necessarily live this truth, but like, I just kind of don't like relying on Sean Payton in fantasy anymore. I feel like he established a reputation for a long time for like, producing fantasy running backs and split backfields and all that. Like, he was the guy for that. But I just feel like for whatever reason, I don't trust him anymore, where he is just so fickle with who he decides to play, the way that they rotate their receivers. Like, Scott and I were both pretty big Marvin Mims believers. They traded up for him in the second round, and then he's like a bit player in their offense kind of deal. And it's just like, I don't know what to make of Sean Payton. I just feel like I don't want to be beholden to the whims of Payton week in and week out on who he's deciding to play, who he's deciding to feature. It just makes me worried. So I think that's maybe just like a personal thing that I'm kind of like anti-Broncos in fantasy, even though I do think that Sean Payton gets the most out of his players in real football.
I think he just hasn't had the talent. Like, I think these are all like mid guys or fringe guys, so he can platoon them. But now you get an RJ Harvey. I think it's different, or at least I hope. I want to believe that.
I want to believe is kind of how I see it too, but I'm not 100% in on it.
Guys, there was the tweet the other day where Sean Payton is retweeting a picture of his daughter with RJ Harvey, and basically saying how his daughter thinks RJ Harvey's awesome. And I mean, Sean Payton's doing everything he can to sort of raise the ADP of RJ Harvey. I don't know, Danny. I think he's pretty excited to have him. And
I want to believe. Never
forget the Michael Thomas shout out where Sean Payton basically told you, take Michael Thomas. He finishes as wide receiver 1 as a rookie. So I think Sean Payton's kind of back this year. He's got his swag. He's got his quarterback. One of the best defenses in football. Denver's a dangerous team. Scott, getting back full circle here. Give us some strength of schedule data with these year 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, so Denver fringe top 12, New England about average, Chicago fringe bottom 12. But when you're not at the polar extremes, when you're in that middle bulk, I kind of just throw it out. The one key stat here, though, playoff strength of schedule, Denver quarterbacks have the third most favorable. So that's really good news for Bo Nix. Great reason to draft him in underdogs tournament style format.
Danny, you are going to be OTC. And we talked a little bit in the pre-show about the scoring format, sort of guess rules here. So you're going to go super flex, tight end premium, PPR. And basically we're going to do every pick is its own team. What you did the previous pick doesn't matter. You don't have to go team context or anything like that. And just take it away.
All right, I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels on this one.
Yikes. That's my 101 in Superflex.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say like this is like maybe one of the like hottest players I think in fantasy period right now. Like he's gonna be the I said this on a show the other day. I think he's gonna be the hardest player to get in fantasy. Even in one quarterback leagues, it's gonna be kind of tough just because everybody wants the excitement of what he brings to the offense too.
If I had Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, I would give that plus like a round 2 for Jayden Daniels and feel great about it.
So I see that the sheet has been adjusted here. I am now at the 2, and Scott, you're at the 3.
I didn't change.
Oh, I must have put that in myself then. So this I think second is a very difficult place to pick here. So like you said, you guys have talked about Caleb Williams, talked about Bo Nix. There's a ton of wide receivers. But the tight end premium aspect here, this sort of sways things for me. So I'm going to pass up on a number of quarterbacks, and I'm going to take Brock Bowers. Ooh. You're starting to see this in some of these FFPC like TriFlex and Superflex startups where the tight end premium drafters are doing everything they can to take Brock Bowers somewhere around the top 5 overall in these dynasty startups because, Danny, we could see the first 20 point per game scorer at the tight end position this year with Bowers, and he could do it for a number of seasons. He needs like 85 receptions to set the NFL record for the most receptions in year 1 and year 2 combined, passing guys like Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Thomas. Bowers has pretty much everything here. I just think he's such an edge for a dynasty startup team. Set it and forget it. I'll find a quarterback a little bit later with this team, but Brock Bowers, lock it in at the 102.
Yeah, I like that. The very generic rule is like you want your tight end to be like the number 1 or number 2 on their team, and like Bowers is a legit number 1 receiver. You know what I mean? He's such a freaking stud. I remember him falling a little bit in drafts, maybe not like super far, but just because of that picture he took with Gronk. Do you guys remember this? Yeah, where he's like wearing like an Auto Trader shirt. He's like kind of balding, which I can relate to. And I remember my co-host Craig and Danny were just like, this guy, really? Are we like doing this? I was like, you have to go watch games, go watch his highlights. It'll get you jacked up because this guy's a freaking stud. And I think, with better quarterback play and better overall offense, obviously you worry a little bit about they're going to be super run heavy in Las Vegas, but I think he's still going to be just the number 1 receiver for this team. And that's huge. You don't find that at tight end. The positional advantage too, I think, is big because there's just kind of a weird, there's like him and McBride, I think right now is kind of like the 2 stud tight ends. I don't really know what to make of Samuel Porter right now. And so just like the positional advantage, the scarcity there also kind of like pushes him up.
Yeah, you could make a case that the number 3 tight end in Dynasty right now is a 31.5-year-old George Kittle because of the points we're banking this year. So yeah, I think he gives you a huge edge. And just from a pure like Dynasty game theory perspective, he's 3 years younger than McBride, and he fired off very similar production to him last year as a rookie. So yeah. Bowers is just awesome. Scott, which way are you going here at the 103?
Yeah, I think 102 is easy. I was with you guys on Brock Bowers. Clear next best pick. I think it gets a little bit. We're gonna have Max Toscano as one of our next guests, and like I love the way he talks about Brock Bowers, tight end expert, tight end guru. He basically talks about him like he's Puka Nacua with a tight end designation for fantasy, like usage, play style, talent. just basically Puka Nacua, which, obviously you get that tight end premium boost. That's massive. I could go quarterback. I think I can go Jeanty. I could go Nabers or BTJ. I guess you're going to have forced me into taking one of these three quarterbacks, and I'll go Drake Maye.
Okay, so Scott goes Drake Maye. That's a really tough choice there. Again, you could go a number of ways. That's why this is such a difficult process. Danny, so you have a lot of great players left here at the 104. Do you stay quarterback like Scott did, or are you going to go with a different position?
I think I'll go with Jeanty here. I think Malik Nabers is in play here, certainly. I think Caleb Williams is in play here, if you still believe in him, which I know a lot of people aren't quite as high. And then a handful of other players, but I got to go Jeanty. I just think, combination of talent, draft capital, situation, it all kind of lines up for him to be immediately one of the most valuable players in fantasy. This is kind of crazy looking at these two draft classes. Like, we've got two pretty good draft classes in a row here for fantasy.
Unbelievable talent in these.
I like how these sync up too, where, last year's class had no running backs except for Bucky, and this class is stacked with running backs.
And on paper, next year's quarterback class is going to be really, really strong and much deeper than this year's quarterback class. So a lot of times it's a crammed in like consolidation of talent instead of just being spread across each class. So very, very good point, Scott. Which way am I going here? I think I'm going to go Malik Nabers, and I'm going to continue passing on quarterbacks for the truly elite talent. Malik Nabers, I have as the wide receiver 3 overall in Dynasty, but it's sort of splitting hairs. I think if he was in a little bit better situation, you could make a case for him being ahead of Justin Jefferson at this point. What he was able to do last year in only 15 games played, exceeding Puka Nacua's reception total, he's unbelievable. Sort of broke fantasy points data metrics last year, Scott, in a number of our categories. Unbelievable talent. He's young, and he's also he's the show for New York. I think he could lead the NFL in targets this year, could lead the NFL in catches. And if Jaxson Dart is better than we think he is, Malik Nabers to the absolute moon. To you, Scott, which way are you going here at the 106?
Yeah, you guys are making me feel like I reached on quarterbacks. So I'm going to go non-quarterback just because I think there's a tier drop after Brian Thomas Jr., which is who I'm going to be taking. Malik Nabers had volume for days, but BTJ was tremendously efficient. I like Liam Cohen going there. I think volume could be even better, even with Travis Hunter there now. Talking about more slot usage, more screens. So I think BTJ and Nabers are neck and neck with each other.
Danny, quick question about BTJ with Travis Hunter next to him. You think that there's a range of outcomes where Travis Hunter takes away the wide receiver 1 from Brian Thomas Jr. in Jacksonville, and a year from now, we're saying that Travis Hunter is in fact the wide receiver you want in Jacksonville ahead of BTJ? Or do you think BTJ is just that guy? He's him. He's going to continue his unbelievable ascension.
I think it's in the range of outcomes that he could be ultimately the number 2. I think Travis Hunter is ridiculously good in term, and especially when you talk about like when you say the number 1, like volume, you know what I mean? Like Travis Hunter could get spammed targets over the middle of the field. It just depends on how this offense kind of plays out. But Travis Hunter playing sort of the Chris Godwin role in the Liam Cohen offense, like this was like a Mike Evans versus Godwin discussion. They're both going to be good, but who's actually the number 1 in fantasy? I think there's a world in which Hunter ends up being the number 1. That doesn't take anything away from Brian Thomas. I think he's going to be really, really good. So I think it's kind of splitting hairs in terms of where these guys could be, but there is that slight worry, But I think overall, rising tide raises all ships. Both guys are going to be better for being on the same team and hopefully elevating Trevor Lawrence.
So, Danny, your OTC here at the 107. We've had 3 straight players who were skill position players and not quarterbacks. Are you going to break up that trend?
Yeah, I think this was close. When I made the list, I had kind of like Caleb Williams, Hampton here. I think I'll go with Caleb Williams just to kind of like make it interesting here. I think you have Caleb Williams, who was generally considered, I know not everybody was as much into him, but like generally considered a generational prospect. Now you're hooking him up with what a lot of people think is like the hottest play calling head coach we've seen in years. You know what I mean? Like Ben Johnson has so much just, I think, play calling cachet or whatever you want to call it. I just can't help but be excited about what this could be going forward. And Williams had, like some spike weeks for sure last year. Like there was flashes where it looked like it was kind of coming together for him. So like betting on that upside, betting what Ben Johnson can do, betting with the improved surrounding cast around him, I think I got to go with Kaleb Williams here, even though I know that this is like a pretty volatile spot and there's a lot of reason to, be concerned about what we saw from year one.
So I'll keep a mind short and sweet here. Scott already made the huge Bo Nix bullish argument a little bit earlier on the show. I'm going to take him here at the 108. I think he's a very good value. Like you guys said, last year, he easily outscored Drake Maye and Kaleb Williams. I get him at a little bit of a discount here. I think at the 108 is a really, really good value for this format. Scott, kicking it to you at the 109.
Yeah, I'm going to go with I don't think this one was super easy, but I'm going to go with Ladd McConkey. He led, I just talked about how ridiculously efficient and productive Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. were, but it was Ladd McConkey who led all rookie wide receivers in yards per route run and first downs per route run and yards per target. Historically great rookie season. And so now hopefully he gets a bit more volume this year. I'm going to go with Ladd McConkey.
Danny, back to you here. You'd mentioned Omarion Hampton. Are you going to go in that direction?
Yeah, I'm going to go Hampton here. McConkey's teammate. I think landing in an offense here that has a really good established offensive line, obviously going to be super run heavy. Under Greg Roman, good quarterback. I think that will get them in position to score a lot of touchdowns. I think it just all kind of lines up really well for Hampton. I think he's going to pretty easily overtake what's his face, the guy that just signed, whose name I'm totally blanking on. Najee Harris, yeah. And I think he'll be like the go-to guy in that offense. So I'll take Hampton here.
And this is where I feel like it gets a little bit interesting. There's quarterbacks like JJ McCarthy, quarterbacks like Michael Penix, certainly Cam Ward. There's a couple of other running backs that I like. I could make a case for Bucky here. But I'm going to go Tet McMillan. I mean, Scott and I have talked about, and Brett Whitefield has talked about for the last few weeks, ever since the NFL draft, just how well Tet McMillan landed. He's in a situation where he could be a 150 target a year player with a offensive system that we believe in with Dave Canales. So for me, I think Tet McMillan, it might seem like a reach for some with all these great players around him, but I'm really into him. I will take him ahead of Travis Hunter, ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., ahead of a bunch of quarterbacks, and ahead of a bunch of running backs. Tet McMillan at the 111. Kicking it to you, Scott. And would you have gone in that direction?
Yeah, I definitely would have taken Tet, but I'm happy with Travis Hunter as a fallback option.
And then expand on what Danny said about what are the chances Travis Hunter can flip Brian Thomas Jr. sometime in the next, let's give it 12 to 18 months.
I don't see that happening. BTJ was just too unreal. And with Hunter, I seriously worry that he's just going to be a 70% route share guy. And so the difference between a 90% route share, 70%, it's just a massive disadvantage for a wide receiver in fantasy.
So to give a quick recap to our listening audience, Jayden Daniels goes at the 101. Brock Bowers goes second. Drake Maye goes third. Ashton Jeanty goes fourth. Malik Nabers goes fifth. Brian Thomas Jr. at 6. Then Kaleb Williams at 7. Bo Nix at 8. Ladd McConkey at 9. Omarion Hampton at 10. And then back-to-back wide receiver picks to end the round. Tet McMillan at 11. Travis Hunter at 12. All right, Danny, get us started here. We're in the second round. You were OTC at the 201.
This is a tough call right here because there's a whole bunch of guys I really like. I guess I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison here. Are we out on Harrison at this point? How do people feel about Marvin Harrison? I feel like it's so funny because last year, I'm just buying the dip on all these guys that kind of flamed out in year one, but I still believe in him. I still think, the opportunity is there for him to be the number one in this offense. But I just don't know exactly what to make. I feel like he was one of those guys who was disappointing relative to expectation, but in reality football, he wasn't as bad as everyone's kind of making it out to be.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Trey McBride is the alpha there. He's going to get the most targets. I think it's a really big ask to say Marvin Harrison Jr. overtakes him just in terms of the raw targets. So that alone is something that kind of takes him down a notch when you compare him to a guy like a Lad McConkey, like a Tet McMillan. The target competition bothers me. Also, we're asking for rational coaching. We're asking for Arizona to go back and say, we need to use this guy differently. And they did towards the end of the year. It was a little bit improved, but it just wasn't a great fit with him and Kyler and him in the offense. So I think where you took him is fine. I think if Scott or I were to take him at 11 or 12, that would have been fine as well. I think he's just sort of in this range. He's not as good as Malik Nabers, and a lot of people are going to suffer for the Marvin Harrison Jr. over Malik Nabers in their dynasty drafts for like years and years to come. That sort of value. Scott, your take on Marvin Harrison Jr. here at the 201.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a Kyler take though. I just rediscovered a tweet I had from, I don't know, April. There's like the Brian Schottenheimer quote where like he was asked why he didn't have Kyler run the ball a lot, and he was like, well, Kyler just never really wanted to run. And then there was the clause in his contract where he had to study at least like 4 hours per week or like watch 4 hours per week of film in order to get, an extra however many thousands of dollars. And then they removed it because they were like embarrassed by it. But like, you don't put that in there unless there's issues. And then there's also, of course, like how his production dips every year right after the new Call of Duty gets released. And there's like all these different things where I just don't think Kyler really gives a fuck. He's Gen Z Jay Cutler. But yeah, I Marvin Harrison. So it's a bet on him being really good, even though he wasn't great as a rookie. And then it's a bet on something about his usage changing, because like his sacrificial X role usage, super high ADOT, low volume wasn't great. And I don't really see that changing too much. It really seems like Trey McBride is their volume guy, and this is a very run heavy offense. So I don't know, not super bullish on Marvin Harrison Jr., but like, I think taking him where you did, I think that's fine.
Yeah, so I'll give another shout out to Chris Wecht. Chris Wecht, highly recommend that episode that Scott and I recorded last week with Chris. He made a huge case for JJ McCarthy to completely crush his ADP and put up top 10 numbers this year. I really believe in the Kevin O'Connell system. And at the end of the day, I'm going to draft a guy who gets to throw passes to Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison. Pretty simple game, pretty simple bet. So I'll take JJ McCarthy here. Even though there's a number of other players that I think I could have made a case for, McCarthy just feels right.
Yeah, I think that was a great pick. I'll take your guy, Bucky Irving.
Okay, so Scott takes Bucky Irving. I like that pick. I thought about taking him. So we have Marvin Harrison Jr., JJ McCarthy, Bucky Irving, first three picks of the round. Danny, keep us going.
There's a couple of guys here that I think are definitely worthy of a spot here. I'm going to go Colston Loveland since we're doing tight end premium here. Top 10 pick, good route runner, has the skill set to become like an every down guy for them. Again, it's like a crowded pass catching core there in Chicago, but I just think you bet on the talent, you bet on the fact that they are betting on him so much. You know what I mean? Like you trust the fact that they went and were so excited about picking him 10th overall. I think it was 10th overall. And just developing that system. So I go Colston Loveland here.
Yeah, I thought that was a great pick. That was almost mine.
Yeah, and this is another one where I'm really struggling. I'm going to take Xaiver Worthy. I think the market's beating up Worthy a little bit because of Rashee Rice. It's sort of in vogue to take Rashee Rice ahead of Worthy. Rice was well ahead of him to start the season in all metrics, but Worthy was so good down the stretch, had the huge Super Bowl. He's just incredibly explosive. And I think when you start actually ranking wide receivers in Dynasty, you reach a point where you're like, I have to put Worthy here. This is a tough pick, but I'm going to take Worthy at 17 overall.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, that's a tough one, Scott. I probably should have gone differently, but little Xaiver Worthy in the mix here. Scott, where are you going here?
I'm going to go with Tyler Warren, who Danny actually liked more than Loveland. So Yeah, I love the talent. It's tight end premium. Landing spot, not great. Could be a little bit better if Daniel Jones starts every game. So yeah,
He was a guy. So I liked him just a hair more than Loveland. Not to say that I disliked Loveland. It was just when I think, Scott, you've talked about this a lot. You kind of have guys, like you have player types that you really start to really like.
yeah.
And Warren is the type of guy where he reminds me in some ways of Trey McBride, where just run after the catch talent, body control, his ability to break tackles, Moss guys at the catch point, like his body control and run after the catch talent. I thought were far better than Colston Loveland. I think Colston Loveland is a better route runner. They're just like very different style players, so it's hard to kind of compare the two of them. But I thought, when you asked me at the beginning of the show, like landing spot fit, what makes the most sense to me? I'm not necessarily saying this is the best landing spot from a fantasy point of view, but fit wise, I thought Tyler Warren in Indianapolis is awesome because I've always kind of compared him along the way to like a Dallas Goedert style player in terms of like the way they use him and the way that the Eagles spam screen plays to Goddard and just let him run after the catch and like utilize him in that way, get him in space and let him kind of pick up yards after the catch. I think that's exactly what Steichen is going to do with Tyler Warren from day one, just spam screens. And obviously that's not like, that doesn't make him like totally bankable from a fantasy point of view, but I think it's a good foundation to build on.
Theo, you and I were talking about this, the likelihood of a Mark Andrews or Dallas Goedert getting traded on draft night. That didn't happen, but that was so disappointing to me. Like,
yeah,
Dallas Goedert would be such a fantasy baller if he wasn't lined up next to AJ Brown and Devonta Smith with Saquon in the backfield. Like, it's just so hard to get many touches that way. And you put him in like a few other teams, I really think he could be a fantasy superstar. Like, I just love the talent.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is going back to another comment you made, Danny, about how just searching for the number one or number two option in their passing game. So like Tyler Warren, a lot of people have beat up this result where he's going to have catch passes from Anthony Richardson or Danny Jones. I think people are really down on the landing spot, but at the end of the day, he has the cleanest profile of any single receiver there. I really like Josh Downs. It's been a guy that Scott and I talked about on a lot of School of Scott's, hits a lot of our metrics on Fantasy Points data, but he's not your classic wide receiver one by any means. And then Michael Pittman's taken a step back. Adonai Mitchell didn't fire. And Alec Pierce is sort of a stylistic play rather than a guy we'd use in fantasy. So a year from now, I think Tyler Warren will be the number one option in that offense. And you could have a much improved quarterback situation. So I sort of, bottom line is, I wish I could do a redo for my Xaiver Worthy selection, looking at some of the players available and hearing you guys talk about Tyler Warren. Kicking it back to you, Danny.
Has Cam Ward been taken yet?
No, he's not. And I wish I could have taken him instead of Worthy as well. So
I feel like he's probably a pretty good value right here in terms of just the way, what I've seen trades happening in terms of, in rookie drafts so far. Cam Ward is going like pretty well above like Loveland and Warren usually. So I'll go Cam Ward here. First overall pick, has a little bit of a dual threat skill set. Hopefully they can figure that offense out and kind of get some value out of him. But I think he's a quality pick right here.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. And it's odd. The NFL didn't give us one single primetime game for Tennessee. It's like the first time I can remember a number one pick quarterback not being in some standalone game at all.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm actually rooting for Cam Ward because of that. I'm going to go Michael Penix Jr. And I don't think this is great, but I do think he has long-term starter written to him. And we like the skill position players around him. I think Zach Robinson knows what he's doing, and we get that indoor environment. So I'm going to go with Michael Penix Jr. I think he'll perpetually be sort of a strong QB2, maybe touch, low-end QB1 line at some point early on in his career. Scott, back to you.
I'll take TreVeyon Henderson.
Love that pick.
Yeah, no arguments there. Love him. Love that pick. I'm gonna go. Do we want to linger on Henderson or should we?
No, we'd love to hear your thoughts on Henderson if you have anything on him, Danny.
Yeah, I just think explosive playmaker. I really like the speed and acceleration that he brings out of the backfield. Obviously, his passing game usage and his passing game value is really what's exciting. And Scott, what's the stat you use? Every target is worth like it's 2.5.
6 times as much as a carry in PPR leagues.
Yeah. And so I think, obviously he has that passing game upside. He's a really good pass blocker, good hands in the passing game. I think he has good vision on like screen plays and stuff like that. So I like this pick a lot. I think he was never going to be a super high volume player, probably in the pros. Feel like Ohio State kind of like realized that wasn't really like the best way to utilize him. And so like pairing him with Ramondre makes a lot of sense. And I think Drake Maye, will lean on him and dump it off. I like that. The first 2 picks for the Patriots were like, here's 2 guys that can protect Drake Maye. So I like that.
And I'll be curious your thoughts on this one, Danny. We're doing a big Dynasty rankings update at Fantasy Points, putting a lot into it. So I'm sort of going back and forth with Scott, going back and forth with Ryan Heath about player values. And we're sort of collaborating on a couple of these rankings. And I've been on the TreVeyon Henderson ahead of Bucky Irving in terms of startup values, in terms of Dynasty values. Ryan pushed back with me a little bit on that one. We sort of, we went back and forth. He says he understands it, disagrees with it. Where are you at on that one? Sort of the mystery box TreVeyon Henderson,
right?
Much better prospect, much better metrics versus Bucky Irving, a guy you've seen now for an entire season.
Yeah, I think I would have Irving just slightly ahead, just based on we don't know what we're getting from Henderson yet, and we don't know what we're getting from that offense really at all. But I think in a McDaniels offense, they're going to utilize Henderson pretty heavily. So I don't like hate that, but I would just have Irving a little higher because, like you said, we've seen it already. I'm going to go with Odunze here. I guess I'm just like continually buying the dip on. I think I'm like one of those maybe Dynasty players that tries not to overreact too much to what happens in any given season in terms of when I look at Rome again, was considered a really, really high level prospect production. Landing spot, I think we're all good. He just didn't really, show out too much as a rookie. I think I still am pretty bullish on him, just like from a, like prospect profile, size, like landing spot, quarterback. Hopefully, will end up being really good, and that he'll be connected to that quarterback for a long time. Offensive play caller. Like, there's a lot to like still, I think, with Odunze. So I'm going to take him right there.
And I'll keep us going. This is another difficult pick to make, but I'm going to go RJ Harvey here at 23 overall. We talked about him earlier on the show. He's been a guy that we've been very high on at Fantasy Points, and the absolute nuts landing spot for Harvey to excel as a fantasy asset. I think he's fine here at 23. Scott, close out round 2 for us.
It was a great pick, a little bit of a snipe. I'm going to go with Luther Burden. I'm just going to hope he's Ben Johnson's new Jarvis Landry on Ross St. Brown. And I feel really good about that.
So let's give a quick recap to round 2 here. Start out with Marvin Harrison Jr. at the 201. JJ McCarthy goes second in the second round. Bucky Irving at the 203. Colston Loveland at the 204. Xaiver Worthy at the 205. Tyler Warren, 206. Cam Ward, 207. Michael Penix Jr. at the 208. TreVeyon Henderson at the 209. Rome Odunze, 210. RJ Harvey, 211. Luther Burden at the 212. Why don't we end it like this, guys? Do you want to do a third round here, Scott, or should we just name a player that we would take next?
The latter. We're already over an hour.
Okay, so let's rock and roll. We're going with the third round here. Danny, get us started.
God, this is tough. I think Quinshon Judkins is the obvious answer here, but I might go Emeka Egbuka over him, just because I just feel like maybe in the short term, Egbuka doesn't have as much value, but long term, I trust that he's going to be a really good player for a long time.
And I will take Quinshon Judkins. I think Judkins here is fine. I almost took him where I took Harvey, but I have Harvey slightly ahead. And I know, Scott, you are not a big Quinshon Judkins fan. But Danny, share your thoughts on Judkins now that you mention him.
I mean, I think he's solid. I didn't like love him or hate him either way. I just was, I think solid player, good burst, good volume back type of guy, the guy they can lean on to carry the load, be the engine, the offense, and obviously the landing spot where he's almost surely going to be sort of like the go-to guy in that run game. I just think there's enough question marks about like overall the Cleveland offense, what it's going to be. I like Dylan Sampson too, and I think they'll rotate him in quite a bit. So I just think there's enough question marks around him, and I just don't have as much confidence in him as a player. That's why I kind of went Egbuka over him. But, this is the right spot for him, I think, overall.
Scott, keep us going.
I would take Kaleb Johnson.
Okay, so Kaleb Johnson goes. We get back-to-back running back picks. Danny, back to you at 28 overall.
Let's see here. I'm going to go with Matthew Golden for the Packers, even though I'm a little bit that worries me a little bit taking him right there. But I think, landing spot is solid, good quarterback, good offense, good coach. And, obviously certain aspects of his game I really like.
Yeah, I've been the noted Matthew Golden backer in throughout all these School of Scots and Fantasy Football Daily episodes. So I like that pick. I think it's good conviction, and simply looking at the landing spot, it's one of the best possible landing spots for Golden to end up being a wide receiver 1. So I like it. I'm going to continue with class of 2025 guys. I'm going to take Jaxson Dart here. Jaxson Dart I think is fine. This is a guy that Brett Whitefield was very high on, so I think everybody should be very high on. We mentioned Malik Nabers. Dart has the mobility, and he's going into an offense where we saw Daniel Jones have a ton of rushing success in. So Dart gives us just enough mobility. He's got a true alpha wide receiver 1, and he's got that kind of moxie to him, that it factor, that swag that I think he could excel in a tough situation like New York. So I will go Jaxson Dart at 29. Scott Barrett, back to you.
My guy, Cam Skattebo.
Skattebo. Okay. Cam Skattebo goes 31. Danny, who are you taking next?
Once again, it gets pretty murky here. I think my head would pick one of the receivers here, but my heart wants Bayshul Tuten. Even though technically in my rankings I've got like Higgins, Besh, Harris higher, I just kind of want Tuten.
Follow your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sniped me on that pick. I was ready to say Bayshul Tuten. I even wrote him in on the sheet. So I'm gonna have to.
Sorry about that.
I'm gonna have to re-go through. I'm gonna take Ricky Pearsall here, and I think this is about right for Ricky Pearsall. I know Scott, you talked about the upside outcome for him this season. I think it's fine. Would I trade Ricky Pearsall for Emeka Egbuka in a dynasty league right now? Absolutely, and I'd probably throw a little something on top. But if Ricky Pearsall hits, he's gonna really, really hit. So it's fine here in the third round. We are going back to you, Scott.
I'm done.
Oh, you know what? Okay, so we're gonna call it. We're gonna call it here. We give you an extra half round here at School of Scott. Danny, give us one more name that you had your eye on that you would have mentioned.
This is a name I'm just going to throw out there because I'm curious where he lands in terms of people's rankings. But where does Jalen McMillan from the Buccaneers end up kind of going off the board?
He's dead post.
You think so?
I love where you're at on that, Danny.
Yeah, but I watched the post-draft press conference, and like I know this is what they have to say, but like multiple times unprompted, they were like, no, we really, really like Jalen McMillan.
And you think that's
Egbuka
bad?
Thing was, long-term and short-term, but we have a clear role in mind for McMillan, blah, blah, blah. So like he's basically dead and free in Dynasty League. So he's a good player to buy really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very, very fun one. Scott, anybody you want to throw out there that you would have said?
No, I ran out of names.
Okay, I'll throw out Terreance Ferguson. He was the one that I was going to try to cram him in before the end of the show.
James Palmer, I was watching the interview with Greg Olson recently. James Palmer said that was a player the Rams would have taken in round 1, but they got that great juicy offer to trade down.
No, I love Ferguson, and I think that's like, and we'll say that highly recommend going back and listening to the pods that Scott did with Greg Brano. Those were really, really fun. And you get a lot of like sort of these tidbits on where these organizations are at on some of their thought process and some of these players. And I think they have a lot of evergreen value to best ball managers, redraft managers as well. Danny, this was awesome. We told you an hour, kept you an hour and 15. Let everybody know again what you have coming out over the summer and the next few weeks.
Yeah, just check out the Ringer Fantasy Football Show. We're recording once a week, plus Ringer Fantasy Football Draft Guide, which is up at theringer.com. I think it's fantasyfootball.theringer.com.
Yeah, and I'll say, please follow all of our podcasts here at Fantasy Points. Drop an absolute fire. If you're a best ball manager, Graham Barfield is dropping some really, really strong content. Had Ryan Heath on last week. I believe they're doing it again this week. Fantasy Football Daily. This week, I have Dave Kluge from Football Guys coming on. And Joe Dolan, I believe, is joining me at the end of the week as well. We're going to look at some ADP values. Dynasty Life, my Dynasty podcast. I have Matt Harmon joining me at the end of the week. Brett Whitefield joining at some point this week as well. So we're going to help you absolutely crush your leagues this season at Fantasy Points. Check out all of our written content, all of our podcasts, and make sure you subscribe to Fantasy Points YouTube as well. We'll see you soon.